It had long been believed that a fundamental prerequisite for a sapient species to reach the galactic stage was the necessity to overcome individualism and embrace cautious collective thinking. This was considered an indisputable prerequisite for achieving the ultimate goal of sapiens, to touch the stars. This thesis endured the trial of time over and over again, proving itself true every time a primitive species wiped themselves out of the cosmos, as soon as they figured out how to split the atom. Some species would endure a bit longer until they eventually did something stupid, such as weaponizing AI to gain an edge over their peers, while others would remove themselves from the galactic gene pool much sooner. This could be done either by attempting large-scale genetic manipulation under the banner of some noble cause, such as eradicating diseases, or for more selfish reasons like the betterment of their own species. There were even those who managed to go extinct using only sharp metal and stones, although this level of violence was uncommon even among the most individualistic and selfish species. Ultimately, it mattered little which creative way an individualistic species used to off themselves. The end result was always the same: utter annihilation. On the opposite side of the spectrum, however, when analysing the species that had survived the great filters and managed to roam free among the stars, another fundamental truth could be observed. The winning strategy for life was collective-oriented thinking, and caution above all conservatism, in the sense of preferring gradual development to abrupt change. The fundamental constant, which had remained immutable and perpetual throughout the ages, was that those who took unnecessary and selfish risks, aiming for momentary gain, would pay the respective price, and sooner or later would perish. Meanwhile, those who cautiously took one step at a time, treading the dangerous paths of life with the due respect it was owed, were the ones who would ultimately survive to take part in the greater game of life beyond the stars. This had been the status quo of the galactic community, ever since the first primordials left their cradle to meet among the stars, and it had persisted for so much longer, until hundreds of known species had followed those same principles to survive, long enough to touch the stars. The long game was the only viable game. This concept was so deeply ingrained in starfaring species' collective mentality, that when a new species appeared on the galactic stage that seemed to reject this rule, their collective reaction was not one of shock and fear, but rather one of unacceptance. This species called themselves Terrans or humans, and the first hint that something was not right with them was observed even before first contact had been formally established, and proper commutation could be achieved. It all started with a croc-eared captain noticing an unknown vessel returning to regular space right beside our perpetual deep space beacon, a construction designed to announce to everyone listening that there were other sapient beings travelling among the stars. What made this event unusual was the fact that the beacon was not meant to be a rendezvous point, but to transmit a message of greeting that, when decoded, would tell a brief story of the galaxy, followed by the space coordinates at which a new species was expected to travel to, in order to introduce themselves to the galactic community. When a new species followed those coordinates, they would find themselves in a system that was inhabited by representatives of all previous species to have reached that place, and would be granted access to the full history of the galaxy, and be introduced to each representative. But that was not what the humans did. They didn't even notice there was a message being transmitted. They were only able to track down the source of the signal, and instead of patiently studying it until noticing the message, like any normal species would do, they took their newly developed long-reach vessel powered by unstable FTL drives for a test drive, and jumped blindly to the source of the signal. If not for the croc-eared captain mistaking the radiation leakage of their ship for an accident that had forced them to return to regular space right there, things might have taken a turn for the worse, since both ships were armed, and the humans were prepared for the unknown. News of the events taking place at the beacon spread quickly, informing many representatives of numerous races that an unusual first contact had been made, and a new unclassified species might need immediate assistance. As many races made their way to the beacon with medical supplies for the treatment of intensive exposure to radiation for the most diverse biologists, the first spaceship to arrive initiated the usual first contact protocols that were meant to break the language barrier. Surprisingly, things went normal for a while, as a baseline for communication was established, and a flow of more complex lexicons began to be exchanged at high speed. But that normalcy was short-lived, and only lasted until the first messages were exchanged. "We came in peace. Why are there so many ships coming here? They are here to help you. We need to know more about the ideal living conditions for your species. Soon we will be able to extract you from your defective vessel and provide medical assistance for radiation exposure. Oh, the radiation is within acceptable levels. Not great, not terrible. We'll be fine. We've been using those cores for more than 50 years. We have plans to improve the design for the next iteration of the FTL drives if the budget allows it. No need to be ashamed of the accident. Every species makes mistakes prior to abiding by the safety standards of the galactic community. Now, please provide information about the ideal living conditions for your species. We appreciate your concern, but this ship is working perfectly as intended. The radiation might do some damage to our DNA over long periods of exposure, but the nanites in our cells will fix the damage as soon as we leave the ship. Please define nanites. We believe that there might be a problem with the translation software. They are machines capable of self-replication and performing a variety of tasks, such as repairing tissue, or assembling and disassembling complex structures. It was the first time in the history of the galactic community that a primitive species had claimed to possess technology that was beyond anything the collective effort of all species that had entered the galactic stage before them were able to produce. If that was all, it would undoubtedly be considered an exceptional feat from a young race and a significant milestone in the history of the galaxy as a whole. But when coming from a species that apparently couldn't even assemble a warp core properly, the incongruence of the situation was bound to give rise to a lot of questions and further inquiries from every single chain of command of every organized entity. So it was no surprise when the representatives that had come to offer aid to the humans only agreed to leave after much deliberation, leaving a single ship behind to deal with the unusual event. It was also predictable that no hasty decision was made on the spot, and first contact proceeded according to the established protocols. Instead, there were numerous intense debates taking place everywhere in the galaxy concerning how to handle this strange new species, and that, of course, away from human eyes. Not that it would have made a difference if they were included, because those talks ended up being all in vain, given that a unified decision was never reached on how to deal with them. Something that had only occurred because the humans were always a step ahead whenever anything was agreed upon. When it was agreed by the majority that it was a good idea to observe humanity from the shadows to verify their claims, the humans themselves had already revealed a great deal of their technology, in the hopes of getting themselves some nice trade deals with other species. When it was agreed by the majority that further inquiries were due regarding how they had obtained such technology, some nasty stories of their reckless behavior and non-existing safety standards were already becoming legends in the traumatized minds of individuals of many species. When it was agreed by the majority that humans should be scrutinized to determine if their technology was a danger to the well-being of the galactic community, some of it was already available on the shelves of every economically active world and being sold at cheap prices. When it was agreed by the majority that it had to be impossible for such a reckless species to have survived long enough to reach the stars without external help, some leaked pieces of news appeared out of nowhere and proved that all of them were wrong. And it turned out that most ruling classes were unprepared to handle this type of imprecise news. Consequently, they interpreted the information as definitive proof that humans had somehow managed to evade the unforgiving great filters of reckless and rapid advancement by doing something extremely simple. Have a failing warping core about to explode? Easy. Humans would just yeet it into a black hole. Has your genetic manipulation pet project turned evil and is threatening to end all civilization? Not a problem. Humans would just warp the entire space station and yeet it into a black hole. Have a swarm of nanites that went rogue and it's consuming all matter around it? Guess what? Humans would just seal it in a containment field and yeet the whole thing into a black hole. Later it was found that these 3 pieces of leaked news had not been shared by any of the human representatives. Yes, they had more than one, but instead originated from some news databases that had been sold by some human smugglers, who selfishly traded their recent history for personal gain. When the humans somehow united to formally address the pieces of leaked news, by adding the relevant context, it was already too late to fix the PR nightmare that the situation had evolved into. At this point, the fact that humans only solved their problems by not solving them at all and just throwing their problems into a black hole had already become part of the collective truths believed by most of the galactic community. It took 5 standard cycles, and numerous attempts of both humans and other species scholars collaborating, to find out the true reason behind the human survival where so many others had failed. They discovered that the key survival factor was having a kill switch for unknown technologies, rather than simply throwing things into a black hole whenever they got out of hand. By this time, however, humans were already roughly integrated into the galactic community, and their infamous tendency to intensify the misinformation of the other species had become itself a whole field of study in the community. Ask a human if it's true that they solved all their problems by yeeting things into a black hole, and chances are that they would go along with it as a weird form of entertainment. Now add that to other species' reluctance to accept rapid change, and you will get a whole millennium of entire species believing that the game of life could only be played in two distinct ways, by either embracing cautious collective thinking, or simply yeeting your problems into a black hole.